Hi, everyone. We're going to be moving on to assessment. And before we start, I'd like you to think about precede, proceed, backward mapping, or understanding by design. All of those planning models tell you to start with the end and move then to assessment. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So let's look at the slide presentation. These are reasons that people evaluate programs. They might look to see if it's cost effective, and there's actually math formulas to use to see if something's cost effective. You could use it for strategic planning, so any mistakes you make this time, you don't make them again. And a lot of times you evaluate your program to add to the profession. So if you have a grant and you have a program that you're evaluating, that evaluation is shared on typically a web page for other people to see. But what we're going to be evaluating is whether or not your event made a difference. And so everything we talk about today is designed to help you get to that point. So before this, ideally you would have completed your needs assessment, but in reality, you're still working on it. You need goals, and those goals should come from national or state places, and that should be in the first timeline that you submit, the draft. And you also should have your own goals. Here's your topic, here's the national or state standards or goals, and then what does your group want to accomplish? That would be your own goals. That's your group goals. The next part of this, once we have all of these, we need SMART objectives, and you've already started to work on those as well. Your SMART objectives should be related to the goals and what you have so far of your needs assessment. So that's where we're going with the next thing we're doing is this final evaluation piece, and all of these things are either partially finished or are finished. So when you look at the precede proceed model, remember you start at the end and you work your way counterclockwise to get back to where you started. So we start with the quality of life and health, and we're looking at social and epidemiological assessment and data. And when you do that, if you look at the bottom, you're actually focused on outcome evaluation. Where we are right now is we're in phase 3 and 4, and we're looking at educational and ecological assessments and what's happening is a behavior that belongs to the person or it's from their environment. And we're looking to see if things are predisposing, reinforcing, enabling. All of that helps us determine whether or not we're addressing the right issues with our population. And when we're talking about this level of assessment, at the same time, we should be thinking about process and impact evaluation. And most of the evaluation that's done for this health fair is based on impact. So this is what you're going to need. You have already turned in your draft timeline. So now we're going to be looking at what to do to complete that whole process. First, you need the SMART objectives, which you've already worked on. And now we're going to be moving to making test questions that match your SMART objectives. The evaluation that I'm describing is based on the evaluation that has already been planned. Just like what you're planning, you start at the end. When planning this with an organization, we know what our goals are, and the next thing that we've done with that organization is establish what the evaluation plan is. So for your evaluation, you're going to need 3 multiple choice questions. 2 will be knowledge, 1 will be attitude. Attitude questions are harder to write, so you will receive probably more help on that than the knowledge, and you'll also receive help on the knowledge questions as well. Your multiple choice questions must have 4 choices, and those choices must be distinct from each other. That means you cannot have all of the above, 2 of the above, none of the above. There have to be 4 answers that are different from each other. And that, what we're talking about now, these test questions and your objectives, this is part of your final timeline that you submit. And so you're going to be using all of this information to finish your final timeline. So this is your draft timeline. Your draft timeline was to have your topic written, your group members, either national or state goals and standards, and then you're going to have your group goals, and then you were to copy and paste your group rules, your ground rules. The first draft of your timeline asked you just to complete the tasks and when it would be accomplished and by whom. And this task list should have been pretty big because there's a lot of steps that go into planning a health fair. The second timeline, your final timeline when you turn it in, you will have objectives in this chart and test questions in this chart. When you turn this in, you'll get more feedback on your objectives and test questions, and then we'll move ahead from there. So you should have objectives now, and now we're going to move to the test questions and other assessments. Again, 3 multiple choice questions, 2 knowledge, 1 attitude. When you're writing your test questions, they need to measure whatever your objective says. They have to have A, B, C, D choices, all different answers. And this is what's really, really hard for students. Well, it's hard for everybody, actually. Let me see. This part of this slide is what's the most difficult for people to get. And that is when you're writing these questions, they must be hard enough that the students get them wrong on the pretest. And they must be easy enough that they get them correct on the post-test. So we're going to send a pretest to the school before we go. They'll take the pretest, and ideally you want them to get as many questions wrong as possible because you want to show that your program made a difference. We're then going to give them a post-test at the health event. And at that point, because they've engaged with you, you want them to get most of the questions correct. So when they see them the second time, they need to think they're easy enough that they can get them correct. That is what most students find the most difficult in this process. So that concludes the slide presentation. You should now be working in your groups and filling out the second part of the timeline, which is the program planning chart. If you have any questions, just make sure you reach out.